bringing me on, and obviously thanks to so many others for joining us this evening. So I'm looking forward to sharing my journey and sharing my experiences, and taking any questions that people want to put forward.
Super. I'm just letting a few others in here. Look, Paddy, I want to start off by asking you a little bit about why you get into coaching. I know you're going to share some of the stuff, but what was it about coaching that really gripped you and made you think that this is what I want to do?
I suppose I had experience of coaching from quite an early age. I think I took my first session around 2002 when my little brother was involved in mini soccer at Knockbreda on a Friday night, and they needed a body to be around, and I got involved in it. And then from then I'd done a bit of work experience in the IFA with Alan Crooks, working with the disability football as it was at the time. And I just the experience of being around other coaches I really enjoyed. Obviously, I was playing football as well, and that was sort of my main focus at the time. And as I started to get a little bit older, sort of in my early 20s, I just enjoyed coaching more, and I started taking my other brother's little team, Maddie's team, his little Rosario team at under 9, and I enjoyed it more. I started enjoying like the jigsaw, as I call it, all the bits coming together, and studying football and watching loads and reading about it, and that was it really. I was playing at the time. I just sort of stopped playing at Carrick Rangers, and I was in playing a little bit with Rosario with my mates, and I just thought, you know what, I could give this. I'm really enjoying it, and I could give it a good go, and that's what I did.
Super. And Paddy, obviously, you took the chance. You took you rolled the dice and you backed yourself really to make the move across the water. What was your overall thinking behind that?
I think it got to the stage where I'll pop it on a couple of slides, and we'll sort of have a little look around it to pick it up from Rosario. But it sort of got to the stage where I'd been at Larne working with Davy McAlinden, an unbelievable experience that he gave me there, and we were in the championship at the time, and I was really enjoying working with senior players. At the same time, I was working in the club NI setup. I've been working at the local Ranger centres with Phil Khan, as well as Curver, and obviously yourself and Prenty at Glenavon. And I was sort of saying to myself, I'm at Club NI working with sort of the best young players that Northern Ireland have to offer. I was still only 25, 26 when I was working in the championship with Davy. And I thought to myself, like, where's my next step from here? You know, where do I go if I really want to have a good go at this? Where do I go from here? And I decided that England was going to be the next step for me, and in between all of those roles that I was holding simultaneously, I had an opportunity to do a little bit of work with the Jamie Carragher Foundation, which obviously gave me a pathway into England naturally. And off the back of that, then from Glenavon and Larne, I got an opportunity at Wigan Athletic, and I moved across to take that up, working with the 12s and 13s there.
How did you find that experience, Paddy? I mean, obviously moving from Northern Ireland, where, as we can all see, you've been involved in a range of different sort of projects, different levels, etc. How did you find that experience of working at a club like Wigan, who, are very competitive from an academy level because of where they're based, and getting players from clubs like Liverpool, Everton, the Manchester clubs, etc., who have been released, etc. So that you're talking about a good standard of player. How did you find it?
Daunting, to be fair. I remember my first session when I went in to deliver it. It was early September. It was 2016. It was a lovely night, and I was working with the 12s. And it was almost like the initial induction session where you're delivering, and you've got the head of coaching, the head of fees, anyone else who's anyone around the club watching you deliver your session. And obviously I'd come across, no one knew me. I did here in England, I didn't know anyone at Wigan other than the fella that gave me the job and gave me the opportunity. And so I went in and delivered it. And the first thing that I thought is, I'll go in and give it the best. But at the time, it's like I didn't have anyone to bounce ideas off really. Obviously I had my coaches that I knew back home and that I still speak to now that I did then. But it's almost a bit like a different game when you come across the water. Initially, that's how I felt it. I don't know whether it was like, you're almost like a rabbit in the headlights at time, but at the time, but it's a different environment. It's a different sort of setup to what I'd been used to. So the first session was daunting, and to be honest with you, probably the first sort of 4 or 5 weeks were daunting after that. And it was only 4 or 5 weeks after that I left and went and joined Everton. So I wasn't there overly long. So it was probably a nice induction before moving across the Everton.
So if you look, Paddy, if you start, if you roll back the clock and go back all those years ago when you first started coaching, the first session that you took, or when you first started to get involved, and you look at where you're at now and the sort of journey that you've had, what do you think's been the biggest lesson for you, or what do you think you've improved the most in your coaching?
I think you learn all the time. I think, like, I look back to the first session that I ever done, and I had a paper round at the time, and obviously I was working with kids that weren't too much younger than I was, and I was thinking, how do I get these kids to listen to me? So I used to get my wage from a paper round, which I probably loosely call my paper round. My mum and dad drove me around most of the time, and done the papers for me. But I used to use the money that I got to buy like chocolate bars, whatever it was. So I used to say to the kids, if you do well tonight, you get a chocolate bar. So then that was my way of getting them sort of on task. Which now, if you go on all the courses, it's all about connecting with the players and motivating them and inspiring them. And a Fredo back then was done the job. But I think there's been loads of lessons I've picked up along the way. Some obviously working with senior players with Davy was a really good one. Going into Wigan, working in that first sort of elite environment. Club NI was a good environment to be in, but it steps up again then when you go across the Wigan, and then it stepped up further when I went into Everton, and you've got to really back yourself in them situations. You're going in to work. I've worked working with players that have played in the Premier League, that have played in the Championship, and top coaches. I look around the office, and I think some of them might even be on the call, but I look around the office and I see lads, and I think they're unbelievable coaches. So I'm surrounded by really good coaches, and so you've got to be on it all the time. There's you can't sort of sit there and think that I've got here now, I've landed and I'm comfortable and I can cruise, because that doesn't happen. And probably if I can think back to one thing that really sticks out, was probably my 11v11 air license assessment. I always think if I could do it again, I would, because I drove down to London and I done it with Franny Jeffers, who's also at Everton. And I remember watching his session, and it was unbelievable. I was thinking, wow, that's the standard there. That's a really good session. And I sort of went in and started delivering mine, and it started off okay, and then it sort of spiraled a little bit. So I had to take myself out of the session for about, I think it was about 8 minutes. Alan Walker timed it at the time, and he was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, I'm just working out how I'm going to fix this. And I went back in then, and I went sort of back to my old style of coaching, and got through it in the end, and I managed to turn it around. But that was probably a lesson for me. Never underestimate the challenge that's going to be faced in front of you, and never ease off, because you think that I've maybe found my B license quite comfortable, and went through my A license doing the phases and the functions and found it comfortable. So I thought this 11v11 will be fine. And I learned a valuable lesson that day, that never to rest on your laurels, and the plan for every eventuality.
Well, how did you find it? Obviously, when you worked at Lauren, working with senior players, what was the biggest difference for you working with the senior players and then coming into a Club NI, Glenavon setup where you're working with academy junior players? What was the biggest difference for you?
And obviously working with Lauren at the time, and when Davey asked me, the phone call came on a Sunday night, I remember it, and he was like, "You've got 24 hours to make your mind up, let me know." And I phoned him the next day and was like, "Yeah, I'll take it." And I remember going in on the Thursday, and they were second bottom of the league. They'd only got 3 points all season. And I remember Davey saying, we've just got to coach them, just get in and we've got to coach them. And even though it was we wanted results and we wanted to climb the table, it was all about coaching the players then and making sure that the sessions were on it. And I remember going in, and the squad at the time had Sturdy King and Mark Picking, who are obviously part of that Linfield side that won that everything there was that year, the Setanta, the Irish Cup, the League Cup, the league. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to be judged now. I've got to be on it. And so I went in, and again, it was preparation, delivered worked with players that wanted, at the end of the day, players want to come in and enjoy the session. They want to feel like they're getting better. They want to feel like they're getting something from it, and they want to see an end goal. And I always think that, and I still stand by it now, at any level, at any age, you can be coached, and you can always learn something. So that challenge for me was, my knowledge, I needed a broader knowledge, needed a broader understanding, needed to make sure I could connect with the players. I needed to demonstrate I knew what I was doing. and then consolidate that with it. So the challenge in terms of whenever you're coaching development football, the top end of it has results at the end of it, but whenever you're working with younger players, you're still working on the techniques, you're still working on the tactical elements of the game. The only difference is the level changes slightly, and maybe the knowledge changes with that. But I found it, I wouldn't say I found it overly difficult. It was just two different, there were two different challenges, but I found them quite similar in a strange way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk to us about your Advanced Youth Award qualification that you've done with the FA.
Yeah,
what were the key learning points that you got from that?
The Advanced Youth Awards all around probably the three most important things. I think whenever you're working with players, it's the environment, the practice, and the player. So it gives us a lot of detail. It's effectively an A license for specific phases within the group. So mine specializes in the foundation phase, and it's all about setting the environment for the players. So what environment is it that you want to set for the players that come in? What way do you set your practice up? So what are the outcomes? What are the aims? What are the returns that you want to get from it? And then the player itself. So how are you going to engage that player in all four corners throughout the session? And obviously it's, it takes careful planning, but the key points around that were how do you engage and set the environment for the players, and making sure that all players get something from it.
So that links in well with you're now currently coaching in the in the foundation development phase. What is your philosophy? What's your way of thinking? What are the key aspects of working within that particular phase?
Enjoyment, first of all, and for anyone, for coaches and players, it's got it's enjoyable. I love going into work. Do you know what I mean? And I'm sure the lads love coming into football. It's got to be enjoyable. But you create the environment with that. I believe we have fun. Whenever we're in training and we're working hard, but we have a competitive environment. I believe the environment that it has to be competitive. We're looking to create players or produce players that can go hopefully through the system, that can go in and play first team. And we know how that funnels on the way up. But we want to create that environment where players can come in, they can work hard, and they can compete with other players, but also they're looking after their techniques. We're helping them develop their technical ability. We're helping them to give them a little bit of a tactical understanding. At the foundation phase, we talk on 2 or 3 tactical points, max. And again, then it's having the players coming in. It's almost like a watered down version of what it looks like further up the ladder, if that makes sense.
So what are the biggest challenges for you working in the foundation phase?
Sorry, it's just I was getting a bit of dry mouth there. Can I pop this down, this screen down? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Don't bother. Can't find my little mouse icon now. I'll just leave it up. I don't know what it's doing.
There we go.
There we go. Challenges, obviously the players are coming into football all the time. We've got our kids are in at the minute 4 days a week effectively. Well, with COVID we're in 2 and a game. Usually we're in 4 days a week, so it's still getting the same points across, but obviously having variety and variation. Kids don't want to be doing the same things all the time. It's like, us as adults, if we come in to do the same thing over and over and over again, it becomes a little bit tedious and a little bit repetitive. However, repetition is good in football, but it's how you can be creative with your practice and ensure that they're getting that reputation, but also it's different for them at the same time, and it's exposing them to different situations that they're going to face in games, and as I've said previously, going through that ladder.
So you mentioned about competitiveness and competition within that phase. I know a lot of people will be thinking, what does that look like? What does that mean? Is that results driven? Is that, competing against other players within your team for positions or to be the best player, because it's a competitive, difficult environment for young players to be in as a professional football club. So, what does that look like?
We make most things, if not everything, a competition. So from the kids come through the gate, it's who's going to be first in, don't be last. So as soon as they come through, it's the water bottles down and they're sprinting into you. How quick can they get in? Who's going to be the last one in, right? What's your task? First thing, right? Ball striking to start off. Who's going to be the first one starting? So everything that we do from the come in until the leave is competition. We believe the competition is healthy. I believe the competition is healthy. At the end, you look at players that go on to, and it's probably anything really. And we're talking about football now and the football environment, but you think of anything in life, those that go on to be successful generally have an element of competitiveness in them, and an element of drive, and we have got to nurture that in the foundation phase. But competition is so important, and you'll know as well, Thomas, there's certain games and where you look at when the fixtures come out at the start of the season, even though it is under 9, 10, 11 football, you look for them games, you look for your Leedses, your Liverpools, your Man Uniteds, your Man Cities, because you know that them games are going to be really tough, competitive games. So that you've got a big thing for us is you've got to train how you want the kids to play, both at our level, both at the age group above that, and right up until first team.
If you look at what that looks like in an actual training session, how your session is structured, how you plan it, you're thinking around challenges for individual players. How does that link in with the competitiveness of what you're trying to get out on a Sunday? So you're looking at your players on a Sunday, I assume, to be, really competitive and dominating 1v1 situations, being on the front foot, etc., etc. How does that link back to your training?
So our practice, so I've said there already, from when the kids come in, we have them straight away in competition in terms of getting in, whether it's ball on the wall. Ball striking is one of our key techniques, something that we focus quite a lot on. So once we go from that, we go into an unopposed practice. So whether that'll be some form of turning, some form of passing and receiving, whatever it may be, and then we go straight away into something that will bring a 1v1. Sometime where there's going to be contact, where there's going to be, you've got to protect the ball. Big thing for us as well is looking after the football, both in receiving and protecting it. So we go straight into, we probably spend 20 minutes at the start with our techniques and an unopposed practice, and then it's straight into competition, straight into matched up 1v1, 2v2, 2v2 plus 1, 2v1s, and then we get into the game, and we probably spend around 30 and around 30 to 40 minutes at times in a game where it'll be 7v7 linked into however we're going to play at the weekend. And we ask our players to be matched up. So whenever we, in practice and in the games, we ask them to be matched up and go tight and go player for player. And a big thing for us is win your individual battles. And the key message is probably that we would give them on a Sunday before the game is, in possession, we want you to get free to receive the ball. So can you receive on the back foot to play forward? That's a big thing for us. Play the highest player possible, whether it's playing out from the goalkeeper. Can we play into our centre forward? If the centre forward's not on, can we play on to one of our midfield players or play into one of our midfield players? If it can't go in there, then we look to build possession from the back. But first of all, we want to go forward and we want to play the highest player and play most of the game in the opposition's half. So that's probably a little bit of tactical information that we would give the players. But obviously to do that, you need the tactical elements of getting free. And then out of possession, we tell our players to fly around and compete. We have to be the hardest working team every single game. That is a non-negotiable for us. You've got to fly around and compete. And when you get the ball back, then you've got to look after it.
How do you deal with players who fail? And what I mean by that is they're maybe going through a really tough time. Maybe when it's competitive 1v1, they're not coming out on top of that in games, or maybe struggling. How do you deal with those sorts of players in that environment, in that position?
Yeah, it goes back to anything in terms of knowing the people that you're working with. So whether it's players, or whether it's lads in the office, whether you've got to know who it is that you're working with. So a really good example of that, we've got a centre forward who's really, really good potential, but struggles playing with his back to goal. And we have in the same group a lad that plays at the back who is an unbelievable 1v1 defender. No matter where he is in the pitch, he's a top player. And so things that we would look to do is in our practices, if we're, depending on what the practice is, we would maybe match him up against someone probably not as good as our best player, if that makes sense. So someone who he's going to get a little bit of success with, and then we'll maybe match him up with someone who he'll get some success and some failure, and then we'll match him up with someone where he might get more failure than he does success. But that's all linked. The players have independent learning objectives. It's all linked in. So, if that's his learning objective in receiving, with his back to goal or receiving under pressure, then it's there for him. And And we might coach the other players as well about the pass. So does it want to go straight into his feet? Are you playing straight in where he's got a pin, or are you playing it at an angle where he could maybe screen the ball and get in behind? So we're also giving them different solutions as to how they can play with their back to goal. But managing failure is it's important, and it's important that kids do experience failure as well. Football, you'll probably experience more failures than you will successes the higher up the ladder that you go. So it's important that they get early exposure to that as soon as possible, and it becomes a good thing to feel as it does as well to have success.
Good. So, like, a lot of people out there, and we do invite people to come on to the chat and share your thoughts around that sort of encouragement of competitiveness. What's your thoughts around it? Does it stress players too much? Whatever your opinion may be, please just come on and let us know. In terms of positions, Paddy, so you're talking about the foundation phase, so you're talking about players from 9 till 12-ish. What's your thoughts around, or what way do you guys deal with players in terms of position specific stuff? Do you pin them down to position, or do you encourage them to play in 2 or 3 different positions, or what does that look like?
Again, I think it depends on the player, and some players will want it. You might have a player that wants to play centre forward and only wants to play centre forward. And at that age, you've got to be careful as well, because you've got to sell it to them also. You might think he might not be a centre forward, he might be a wide player, he might be a full back eventually. So how can you expose them to the other positions? And again, you've got to sell it to the kids. The kids aren't soft either at that age. So it might be a case of, why don't you come and play out here where you've got loads of space and the game's in front of you, where you can collect it and drive forward and see if you can link up, and generally the kids buy into it. You get some players as well that that play in certain positions, and you can tell that they're going to have a really good chance of playing in that position. So for me, I know it's a big bone of contention. Some people think they should experience 2 or 3 positions. Generally, our players will play 1 or 2 positions. If we have got a player that maybe needs to look after the ball a little bit better, or maybe play a little bit quicker, we might play them in centre midfield, because the game's fast in there and there's loads of people flying around and trying to get the ball back. We might have players that again struggle receiving with their back to goal, so we might play them wide where the game's in front of them. We might need players that need to be exposed to 1v1 defending, so we might play them as our central defender when we're playing a 3-2-1 to expose them to 1v1 defender. But generally we'll play players in their strongest position at that time. And that's not to say that it doesn't change when they move through the age groups, but where they are at that time, that we generally play them there. But we have swapped them through at occasions, but generally we stick to where they play at that age group.
What's your thoughts around stretching players? So say, for example, you've got a player who's under 10 and he's excelling, and he's a centre forward and he's scoring 4, 5, 6 goals every week. How do you try and stretch him? Is it a case of moving him up a year group, or is it a case of putting different constraints on him within the game or within training? What's your thoughts around that?
I always think depend on constraints can work 1 or 2 ways for you. I think it's almost like when you play 2-touch and you've got a kid who's a really good dribbler. So you're asking that kid that is super strength dribbling, and you're asking them not to do his super strength. Whereas if your kid's a really good dribbler, you want him to dribble, don't you? You want him to take players on. You want him to be creative, and you want him to get past players. And he might lose the ball, but he might beat someone and then stick it in the net or a sweaty for someone else. So I always think constraints can go against you as well as for you. I think constraints for me, are probably more practice based in terms of linked in the ILOs, linked in the sessions, linked in the work that you're doing during the week. I think if the kid's struggling, if the kid's striving in a game and find it really comfortable, then mixed age. We do a lot of mixed age group training where 9s will play against 10s will play against 11s. They'll play with each other. They'll play against each other. So that would be an early test for them to see are they ready to step up. So technically, are they ready to step up? Physically, are they ready to step up? Psychologically, could they deal with stepping up, playing against bigger, faster, quicker players? And what are they like socially? Could they go into the group and communicate?
So if you look at you mentioned there about the psychology side of it. Look, it's a competitive environment like we spoke about. The turnover of players, you very rarely get a player from under 9 that makes it to under 16s or even makes it into scholar. How do you prepare the players psychologically day to day training? games? How do you prepare them to be resilient or tough or deal with these kind of setbacks?
It goes back to them experiencing failure. If you bring kids the whole way through only experiencing successes and being successful, then when that failure hits them, then they don't know how to deal with it. So it's that early exposure. The failure is important. And we've said before, we do that in practices. We do make sure that kids are tested when they're playing against a range of players. In terms of like being ready to step up, I think at any level, at any age, good players appreciate good players. I think whenever a player steps up to play up, if they're ready, the fallout usually comes from those that are maybe at the bottom end of the group that may not be playing or that may be left out because you've got a player from the age group below that's stepping up to play. I don't see an issue with players who are really competing and doing really well, almost comfortable. We've got one or two players that have just clocked buzz on the call there, and you can probably back this up. But we've got some players that at their own age group can collect the ball and literally from their own goalkeeper and run the full length of the pitch and either sweaty the goalkeeper to finish or just finish themselves. So you've got to ask in games at the weekend, where's their challenge coming if they're able to do that? If they're able to do that consistently. So that would be an argument to play players up. And again, then when you play up, are they able to do that then? So the game's quicker, even if you only step up in age group. So are they able to get the ball off the keeper and dribble the length of the pitch? Chances are no. In fact, a kid that I mentioned then got the ball from the keeper and lost it and they conceded from it. So his lesson was, actually, when I step up, the game's faster. I'm not able to do this now. So my decision making then has got to be quicker. And then it's on the us then in the practices to make sure that we're speeding up his decision making should he have to step up and play up.
So if I use, for an example, a centre forward who at under 10 is able to score 5, 6, 7 goals, come back, get the ball from the goalkeeper, beat everybody on the pitch and score. I've often heard it suggested, I'm seeing it happen. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I've often heard people talk about how do we stretch that player then? Do we put them in a centre back position, for example? But what's the trade-offs of that? Is you put them in centre back, is he going to get as many chances to maybe get in front of goal, score from different angles, receive from different angles, receiving behind, receiving front, whatever? What would your suggestion be to really stretch a player who is really excelling in that position and scoring goals? Because we know that's the hardest thing to do in the game. If you do have a centre forward who is really, really striving at his own age group, maybe physically he might be struggling to maybe move him up a year and he might struggle a bit. What's your thoughts in terms of how do you really stretch that player within that phase?
Linking it into, again, ILOs. So every player will have a super strength that they'll continue to work on to get better, and every player will have something that they need to work on, and that ILO will be sort of decided between coaches and the player themselves. So it'll be a case of what kind of goals are the players scoring? Are they scoring the same goals? Are they scoring different goals? Are they not scoring a certain type of any goal? So it might be where can you link play? So can we play into you and you protect it? Maybe link up and get like a ball beyond where you've got to run in behind and maybe finish. Can you maybe ball into you and switch the play and change the play of attack and then get in the box again? So within that, it's a case of, I would say, linking it into the ILO in terms of what the player needs to develop and the area that they need to work on. Identify others, like I've said before, they're scoring the same amount of goals or they're scoring different goals. If they're scoring a broad range of goals, then it might be a challenge. Again, we talk about can you finish with your left foot, but you don't want them running around the ball to get it on their left foot if they're right-footed. So you've got to be careful with the constraints that you put on them in games. If a centre forward scoring 5 or 6 goals a game, then you're saying like happy days. Do you want to keep scoring 5 or 6 goals a game? Just maybe try and look at how you can vary that up. Is it you need more headers, whatever it may be? Then it's are we getting the ball in the right area for him to score them kind of goals? But I would link it to the ILOs. I would link it to what it is that they need to improve on, and then how can we bring that into the game.
So if you link that into the environment that you create and you encourage competition, you encourage players to fail, you encourage players to stretch themselves, you encourage players to enjoy success as well. What type of environment do you like to create within the foundation phase age groups? Obviously, we've talked a little bit before about making sure that it's fun, making sure the kids are enjoying it. It's a game, it's football, it should be enjoyable. But what does that environment look like for you?
Lively. So I I think when you come in, if you came into us and looked at the 9s, 10s, 11s, you'd see like the sessions would be, the coaches would be flying around the sessions, to be loud, to be vocal, to be, you know, pushing the tempo of the session, to be encouraging the positive play. And I think that's vitally important. It's almost like the foundation phase is that they're signed players. So it's almost like the first step on that journey towards the top. So it's almost like you're at the first stage of prep. It's like primary school. You win the P1, you're preparing them for P7, or, you know, reception for year 6, and that's the same with us. So it's gotta replicate that as you go through. And I think all the groups with us, as you come in, they're lively. And the coaches are vocal, coaches are energetic, they're enthusiastic, the players rub off on that. There's loads of challenge in the session, there's loads of transition in the practices. It's not very stop-start, it's constant ball moving time. And I think that's, for me, that's how a foundation phase should look. Loads of challenge, loads of transition, loads of decisions, loads of competition, and really loud and vocal.
So if I use one word, it's ownership. I often do you give ownership to the players for their own learning, for their own training, for their own development. And the reason why I ask it is because I see Keith O'Hare is on the call tonight. Keith, we had a conversation 3 or 4 weeks ago, a coaches chat group, where we were talking about with a meeting on Zoom, and we talked about, you know, are players overcoached, or do we try and put too much information into their heads? But what sort of ownership do you encourage your players to have, if
We
any?
tend to stick to maximum three points a session, and as simple as possible. And it's something at times that I forget about, and you go out and you think, like, I'll try and be clever here, and I'll try and squeeze 1 or 2 additional points into the practice, that, you know, to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. But you've got to understand, the players, for us, it's the same across the board. 9s, 10s, 11s in the foundation, we stick to 3 key points, and we only coach them points throughout the whole session. In terms of player ownership, then, the decisions that they face, so depending on what the practice is, you know, so if you're playing 1v1 matched up, so what decisions have you got? What decision you got there? Movement to get on the ball, you're going to receive it in behind, you're going to receive it in front. We'll give them solutions. Generally, we'll just start the practice. We'll tell them, this is what it looks like. Ball goes in, let's play. And if there's a good point in there, we'll highlight that. Did you see the movement to get on the ball? If there's a little bit of failure, a little bit of struggle, then we'll say, think of how we can get this. You know, so is it a double movement to get in? Is it a triple movement? Is it just high to low? What does it look like? Do you have to pin and protect? Can you bounce? Can you rebound? Can you play in behind? So we generally start the practices with players. We outline what the practice looks like, and then the players have a go, and then we'll get in with, you know, I said 2 or 3 points, and those 2 or 3 points are linked from as soon as the players arrive until the game finishes at the end. And the game's probably important. We go into, if we set a game up to play at the end, we'll go in and give our points early, sort of 2 or 3 points quite quick, and then let the game flow, and then the players can make decisions for themselves and try and demonstrate the learning that we've just tried to put them through.
I've heard it before. People talk about, you know, giving players ownership, or not just giving them ownership, but seeing what sort of ownership they take upon themselves of their own learning and development. And something that a lot of clubs now are fortunate to have and taking on at all levels is the use of video analysis, because we know that young players now coming through, they're better than me and you probably on technology. I know they're certainly better than me. I just learned how to record on Zoom tonight for the first time. So, you know, how do you use, or do you use that sort of video technology, that analysis, to give the players a bit of ownership?
Yeah, we use, so again, I keep referring back to the ILOs, which we work on with the players, which again is a super strength and something that they need to work on. We use Huddle, so all our games all the home games are recorded. Some away games, most away games are recorded. They'll be uploaded to Huddle. Players will then have the opportunity to go in, watch those games back. They can clip the games, so if they see something that they've done well, they can clip them. If if there's an area that they feel they could have done better, they can clip them. When the kids come in on day release, so 1 week, one Friday and 4 players would come in to us out of school, and we'd do like a small analysis session, just sort of making them familiar with it, of what it looks like, why we're looking at it, what it is that we're highlighting. And then the players have an opportunity to send those clips to us, and obviously it's been really important, Huddle, over the last 9 months now in lockdown. Huddle's been great, where we've been able to set challenges online for the players, and the players have been able to do the videos and send them back to us. So probably when we go back normally, the kids will be more used to Huddle than they will to playing football.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we use Huddle as well at Leeds, and we've just signed on for it for Bradford. But one of the things I've found about Huddle is it's absolutely fantastic. I love it. I think it's great. And even I can use it. So that tells you how easy it is to use. And kids, there's nothing as powerful as being able to watch themselves back in a game or training and picking things out. And as you said, linking it back to the ILOs. But we have found it to be causing a little bit of a problem, whereby maybe parents are the ones who are doing the clips to maybe make the kids look great. Um, is that something that you've found to be an issue? Or, if the players are making the clips, what kind of interaction do they have between the players and the coaches to discuss the clips, to go through them, to maybe pick out little pointers?
Yeah, we would discuss. So if on the parent one initially, you do get some clips in where there's, it's clipped better than some of the staff have been able to clip it and put it together. And listen, the way I look at it is, if that's the case, that the kids obviously learning from whoever's clipping it together, so they're showing them how to do it in group practice, and obviously highlighting areas that are linked to their game. So you take the positive out of it rather than look to create an issue from it. In terms of what the players clip, they also and bring in, we will discuss that. So we have a 10-minute. We have a little, we call it like a feedback window. When the players come in, we'll speak to them about how's their day been, if it's linked to this session before, was there anything they've done in the session before that was well, asked them. And we'll talk about clips, especially if we watch the game back on those games on a Sunday, we'll watch it on a Monday, we'll then train on a Tuesday. And if a player's done something really, really good in the game on the Sunday, we'll make an effort of getting round the players and saying that, that you've done, that was a lovely goal you made, or the weight of your pass there was superb, or I love that moving screen in the middle to help switch and play. And we'll comment on them as well. So if a player sends us a clip or uploads a clip, which obviously only we can see, it's the beauty of Huddle is that when players clip it and coach clip it, you can only see what it is. So they'll clip it and send it to us, and no one else can see it, and we'll comment on it then, and you'll have that interaction. And it's important then, because if we don't go back and say, that clip was really good, or have you thought about why you might do this, or then the player might not do it again. And the more you go through the age groups and the older you get, the more important video analysis becomes, not just for your individual performance, but obviously your units and your teams then as well.
How important is it to review your performance as a coach back by watching your clips on Huddle, or do you think it's important at all?
Yeah, massively important, and it's the worst thing in the world. Any coach that's been filmed and mic'd up and had to deliver a session and then have to watch it back, it's like, I watch it twice. And I always laugh. I watch it in mute the first time, because I hate listening to my own voice talking. So I'll watch it in mute, and then I'll watch it back with the sound on, because it's important to make sure that you're getting, first of all, that you're speaking to the players in the right way, and your mannerisms on the side, and the information that you're giving. Are you giving too much? Are you giving just enough? Have you missed an opportunity to get something really valuable in? And you can, again, you may miss something in training that's important, that you have to then go back to and say, you know what, I watched training back yesterday, and actually I meant to say to you, you've done this really well. So it's like, self-assessment is one of the hardest things that you'll ever do, but it's one of the most beneficial things for you. And it's not, it doesn't get any easier. I think we do it 2 or 3 times a year, and it doesn't get any easier.
One of the things there that kind of just popped into my head as you were talking there, one of the things we've tried to do at the Plan for Future Academy is embed a culture and a common terminology that we use. We haven't had a chance to do it, if I'm being honest with you, because of obvious reasons. We've only tried to kind of implement it, but it's been really difficult. How important is it, in your opinion, to the use of terminology, or in your intervention? So say, for example, you're going in and you're making a coaching point. How important is it that you're using the same language as your mate who's coaching with you, or is that something you don't really see to be an issue?
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's definitely important. We had this conversation the other day. I remember when I first came over to Liverpool, we say we as in like a small. So back home, we means small, but in Liverpool, we means going for a wee. And I remember saying, like, I need you to take a wee touch, and these like 6-year-old kids were looking at me like this, as if like, what do you mean I don't need a wee? And I was like, no, sorry, little. So it's even like even the language that they use away from football. It's important that you understand the language that the people of the area use as well. But coaching language is so important. We use the same terminology at under 6 as we do at under 16. We have in possession terminology, out of possession terminology, and it's important that it's used, because that means you're not explaining the same message every year or different messages all the time. It's specific words for specific parts of the game that the players understand and they know, because it's been ingrained in them from such a young age.
And what does that look like in terms of terminology? Say, for example, you're working on an in possession topic. What sort of terminology do you use?
We keep it dead simple and basic, and there's no magic to it. Like it's simple points in terms of the player understand. Play for. So when we want to play forward, pass forward, run forward, look forward, pass forward, run forward. Do you know what I mean? So can you play forward? Those three things come with that. Look forward, play forward, run forward. Like switch and play, protecting the ball, screening, move and screen. Just terminology that we would use when we haven't got the ball. Can we go get it back? Things like that, just dead simple terms, because obviously we're, like I said, it's simple from 6, so we're starting to use these terms with the kids at 6. We want it to be as simple as possible. We use certain triggers or like anagrams as such when we're playing. So like when you're defending, A, B, C, and we've added a D. So angle of approach, body shape, chest facing the football, contact, defend. So that would be one. So think about your A, B, C, D when you're defending. When we haven't got possession, think of your 3 Bs: bouncing ball, back to goal, bad pass. Can you go win the ball back? So we would refer to those things for the players that right through the age groups, that the players are familiar with. And again, then it's introduced at an early age.
In terms of interventions, what do the majority of your interventions look like as a foundation phase coach? Because obviously, if you're working with senior players, it's going to be a lot different than what it is working with foundation phase players.
Yeah, a lot of the time with us, it's just drive-by coaching. So if we're working on a practice, the kid will be in for a certain amount of time and then they'll come out. And it could be a case of where it's just think about the detail when you're passing the ball. So if you play that with the outside of your foot, is the ball going to go away from the player, as opposed to if you play it with the inside of your foot, it's going to go towards the player. So think about the type of contact that you make with the football, and if you strike the top of the ball, where it's going to go, as opposed to the bottom of the ball. So it might just be individual drive-by coaching. If it's a persistent message or maybe a progression or something else, then it might be okay, have a little listen here. Let's have a look at this. What's your thoughts? But generally, we do our points at the start where we're explaining it. If we're looking at a progression, 1 or 2 progressions max, it'll be okay. Can we look at this? Generally, after that, it'll just be drive-by coaching and dropping little messages into players as you walk around the session.
So how about the practice design then? What does that look like for you to, within the foundation phase, to sort of bring out the outcomes that you're looking for? How do you do it? What things do you look for?
First of all, we set everything up within the pitch. So the first thing that we do is set up the pitch that we're playing in with the marking. So if we don't have a box, we make a box. So say, for example, you've got a full astro and you're setting up to play across the width of the astro. You need to use reference points for players. So we'll obviously set the pitch up, use flats and whatever for creating the box, because it's a reference point for your goalkeeper, it's a reference point for your centre half, it's a reference point for your centre forward, it's a reference point for your midfield players. And we'll maybe double cone the halfway line, so as the player, players know that when the ball goes forward, I've got to move up with the ball and be aware of what's around them. So we set all of our practices up inside the pitch, unless obviously there's an area that we maybe need to overspill slightly, but generally it's set up inside the pitch. With the coaching points that we look at, I've said before, we look at 3 coaching points. Whatever it is that we're working on that evening, we will work in that specific area. So if it's attacking from wide areas or defending wide areas, whatever it may be, that'll be set up in a wide channel. If it's receiving back the goal, it'll be sent up. Generally, it'll be set up centrally. If it's a possession-based practice, depending on what if is it a possession to play through or play beyond. If we want to play beyond, that possession might be set up in and around the halfway line where there's space in behind for us to play through, for the player to run on to. So we link it into what it is that we're working on, and the sessions generally flow with a ball mastery start into some sort of unopposed practice in the either a 1v1 possession based game, or and then in the game itself. is generally how it flows.
So there's this, obviously the Irish FA have produced over the last few years the Let Them Play document. We know it's been kind of delivered in a different way in England for the last few years as well. There often seems to be a misconception that we set the game up and let the game be the teacher, but it's the setting of the game up that allows the game to be the teacher. So, for example, or can you give us any examples of how you might set a practice up to be the teacher of the game, if that makes sense?
I remember hearing a really good quote from a fella and it's never left me saying the game can only be the teacher if the teacher understands the game.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, as you said there, in terms of how you put it together, I think it's I always think you revert back to like school, for example. If you'll set up a practice and you'll with specific outcomes, and if the kids don't get that outcome, then you've got to tell them. It's like if a teacher gives your kid a book and say and then sends the kid home to read the book, and the kid can't read the book, but the teacher goes, got to learn it for themselves. Do you know what I mean? Like that, that's not acceptable in a teaching environment, is it? They've got to show them how to read the book, and that's the same in football. And generally, the game can't, like, I always think that, like, you've got that. This might be controversial, but you've got that window, obviously, that everyone says the foundation years up until under 11 are where they're at their most absorbent. So that's where you've got the most opportunity to get the right detail and the right information into those players. Now, when they play games, like I said before, we probably give 1 or 2 points at the start of our game, and then we leave it free for the players just to go and play. But in the practices, generally we'll introduce the practice, allow them to have a go themselves. Again, highlight good play, but generally we'll ask them in the practice what it is that we look for. And I think that's a good way of doing it. Some people may disagree, but I think it works for us.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic that we could get into, I guess, all night. But we'll move on swiftly because we're actually coming in to the end of the webinar, which is great. I've got a few questions that I want to get through from people. One here from David McCullough. What's your thoughts on bio-banding, and should it be brought into Northern Ireland? If not, then what other way can we help late developers? Because we know about the whole thing about the bias towards players that are born at a certain period of time in the year. What's your thoughts around that?
We don't bio-band at Everton. I know some clubs do. I know Southampton are big on bio-banding. We do a lot of mixed age group stuff. So we'll sort of match players. So if we play 9s and 10s mixed, we'll sort of match them up in terms of like technical ability, physical ability, and just based on what we see. For me, I like the way we do it. I don't see, I think the coach can look after that. I think the coach can control it. Some clubs swear by it. I know, like I said before, Southampton are massive into it. For me, it's not something that I wouldn't say I'm not keen on it. But it's not something that I feel that we need to introduce personally.
Okay, interesting. What's your thoughts around in Northern Ireland? Do you think it should be introduced into the setup in Northern Ireland? Because look, and a lot of people on this call will know more than me, but with the constraints around league rules and all that sort of stuff, you very rarely get the opportunity to, for example, under 15 who physically is really struggling to play them at under 14s. You very rarely get that. Plus the other sort of barrier that you have, I guess, is, the coaches that take a lot of the teams back home or maybe move through the age group with the team. They don't want to let one of their players maybe drop down in the age group, for example. Then you've got the parent issue. You've got all sorts of things around it. Do you think it's something that should be looked at more in Northern Ireland to try and help those late developers, or what's your thoughts?
I think, like, I don't see issues in terms of playing players down, and that's you'll know yourself in terms of lads that sometimes we'll have trialists that'll come in that'll play an age group down just to get games. Other times there'll be players that might need to. We rarely play players down, but if we do, we would explain to obviously the clubs as to why we're doing it and why they're playing it down. I think it's I do think it's something to consider. that I think it falls into a whole different conversation in terms of how football is structured. Back home, I think I'm probably an advocate of the old setup in the counties, and you stay within there, and you probably have more control over it, and then you go and represent, like your regional teams and things like that. And I think you could control it that way. I think with the academy set up the way it is, I don't think they would be as open to it, possibly. But I do think it's a really good question, and I think it should be something that is considered.
I think there's loads of examples of obviously where it's helped players. I mean, Jimmy Shackleton, who's in the Leeds squad, played down for 3 or 4 years. You've got Sam Barham, who moved from Leeds to West Ham a while ago, was the same. Charlie Taylor, the name, you could just, read through the names. So they had the opportunity to play it down for a couple of years. And I think it does open up a longer conversation, which maybe we'll touch on some other time. I think it's a really interesting topic for me, and it was a really good question. So
yeah, definitely. And it's going to be individual for the clubs as well, in terms of how you recruit and the profile of players that you look for, and what it is. A lot of like the likes of us, our players are big and athletic, and that's probably the profile that we go for. So is there a need for us to do it? Probably not. Whereas other clubs maybe recruit in a slightly different way, where there might be a need for it there. Again, that will come down to the club and how they recruit.
So I've got a question here from Stevie Savage, our head of recruitment for the Playing for Future Academy. Stevie talks about how do you link the coaching and recruitment? So say, for example, you have a player that comes in on trial. How do you embed them into the new environment? And what do you do to make them feel as comfortable as possible, really?
There's a couple of ways that the players can come in for us. So we have a development center, and like this, so we sort of have like 3 tiers where you come into the development center, and then you've got like the EDP, which is like the development program, and then obviously you've got the main groups. Players that would come into our main groups would be great. The first night that would come in, obviously come in with a parent, we would greet them. So myself or the other coach, whoever it is I'm working with, along with the head of recruitment, would greet the parent and the boy, and just introduce yourselves, have a little chat. Then we would obviously go into the session, introduce the player, and all the boys say, listen, this is such and such who's in with us tonight, going to be training with us over the next 8, 10, 12 weeks, and make them feel welcome. Depending on if they've got a connection already, some of the boys will know each other from other clubs, from grassroots, from school, whatever it may be. If they don't, then we'll maybe get someone saying, go you and work with Tom, for example. So as they've got like a buddy straight away, then we might do, the first bit might be around working in pairs as opposed to individual work. So they're getting to meet someone straight away. And then we have weekly phone calls anyway with parents, where we'll contact them just to make sure everything's okay. So we'll touch base with them. And then we generally phone them halfway through the process, and just like a little update. Everything going okay from your end? This is what it's looking like from our end. And then at the end of the trial, depending on whether it's retain or release, then we have a meeting prior to meeting with the parents, or the parent around the decision, and then we meet with the parent face to face, depending on it's face to face either way, whether you're going to sign them or you're not, and we explain our reasons for both.
Good stuff. We've got a question here from Dave Dunnan. Dave, great to see you. I'm going to chuck you under the bus here and ask you to unmute yourself and ask the question to Paddy, if that's okay.
Hello, Paddy, can you hear me?
Hi, David, are you okay?
Hey, how you doing? Really enjoyable session. Just a quick question. I love how you encourage the competition and the players to be first into the dressing room or first to get on the ball. How do you address a player who is consistently sort of last at sort of getting into that competitive spirit, shall we say? Or how long would you let it go before you address it?
You can be creative with it, depending on what it is and you're asking in that competition. So for example, it depends if you know that they don't make the episode. Some kids love being last in, and it's a joke. Some kids will be like, I want to be last, and even though they're the quickest in the group and they're probably the closest to you, they just want to be last in because everyone laughs and the kids are like, oh, it's you, and that's that's you've just got to get on with it, haven't you? You've just got to go on. But we always turn it into, like, I'll always say something at the start of the session, for example, is if you get first in, you're going to be 10 touches better than the person next to you. So if you're the last one in, whether it's juggling or you're the last in the ball striking or you're the last into the practice, sometimes we'll explain the practice and a kid might take a while coming back from a drink, and we'll just go straight into the practice. And then if the practice has to stop, it's like, okay, well, we'll explain it all again. And we wouldn't single a player out and say, we'll explain it all again because, David wasn't listening, for example. But we would just go in and say, we'll have to explain this again because some of you weren't listening when you should have been listening. So that's 5 minutes off your game, or that, you're now 5 minutes, not ahead of where you should be at this stage because we've had to waste this time speaking. And we'll put it on the group rather than put it specifically on the individual. But generally, again, we spoke about it from the last question in terms of the biomechanics. It goes down to the type of player that you recruit, and a big thing that we recruit is players that are competitive. When they come in, we generally see them flying around and competing and having that little edge to them. So generally, it's not something that we have to deal with too often. And once it becomes something where it's 2 or 3 times where a player is maybe coming at the end, then you maybe go and stand at the other side closer to them, go last one in, and then they're the first or the second in. So you'd be a little bit creative as to where you invite them in from. But yeah, generally it's being clever around it, and again, it goes back to one of the first points of knowing the boys in your group.
No, that's fantastic. Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks for the question, Dave. I've got one more.
Thanks for throwing me under the bus, Tom.
Nah, no problem, mate. Me, no issue. Just one more question here that has come in, Paddy, and then we'll leave it at that unless anybody else has got any more questions. But one of them has come in from Murray Jones. What does a match day look like in terms of match day interventions, coaching behaviours, and team and individual targets?
Match day for us, so we generally get the players in about an hour before, between an hour and 15 before kickoff. When COVID came in, it was actually brilliant because the players were coming in half an hour before kickoff with their kit already on. You met them on the grass and you cracked on. So generally they come in, we'll have a little walk around the pitch where we're playing if we're at home. Come in the change rooms, get ready. We'll give them 1 or 2 little bits of information. Generally, we have to rein them in a little bit because they're buzzing to play the game. So we'll calm them down. We'll talk about what it looks like. So what does it look like to play for us? What are the common traits that we want to see? Just remind them, keep it fresh. Then we'll get out. We'll go out for the game. Do a little warm up. We don't have a specific structured warm up. Generally, we'll just get the players flying about with the ball, receiving, collecting it. Bib them up, half in bibs, half and out. Play a little game amongst themselves. Bring them back in. Again, 2 or 3 points max in possession, out of possession. What does it look like when we have the ball? What does it look like when we haven't got the ball? Little triggers about how we can win it. So if they're playing out from a goal kick, what does it look like? How can we get the ball back? What's your role within the team when we're in that position? And we asked them, going back to one of the earlier points as well. So if you're this player, say we play a 3-2-1. So if the ball's with the goalkeeper and you're the centre forward, what's your role? You got to pick a side. So if he picks a side, what's your role in midfield? Well, I've got to be ready to jump if it goes to the other defender. So if you're getting ready to jump, what's your job? Well, I've got to stop the pass into their centre forward, but be ready to intercept if it comes in the middle. Okay, so what's your job then as a defender? I've got to be 1v1 against their centre forward. Wide players are picked up, and then when we want to play out, what does it look like? So if the defender picks one side, the wing back will play the other side. The other one goes high, and we look to play in. So they're the only real tactical messages that we give. Can we, and then it's, can you play forward quickly, play forward, run forward, pass forward, quickly in terms of what it looks like on the line. I'm not shy in saying that we would get after the players, and we would drive the tempo from the line. Thomas can probably vouch for that. Leeds aren't too dissimilar to ourselves, but generally we drive the tempo within the players, and that's not a case of like playing the game for them. It's more so, like, can we get the ball back? Can you pinch? Can you intercept? Can you play forward? Loads of positive encouragement. That's really good play. Just really positive from the side. Then when they come in, we generally play 2015. So we've got 3 coaching interventions. There are 3 opportunities to give information. Generally, again, 1 or 2 points as given before the game. If there's something that's maybe we're not winning the ball back quick enough, or we're not setting our triggers or our chops quick enough. We might focus on them, but generally it's just the 2 or 3 points that we've said at the start that we look for in every single game, and during the game we just get after the players.
Super, thanks for that, Paddy. Look, folks, we're going to leave it there. I'm going to thank everybody for joining in tonight. Some really, really good questions. I've posted some details up on the chat about upcoming webinars. So on the 11th of February, we've got Seamus Bigelow from Leicester City, experienced coach, worked at Sheffield Wednesday previous to moving to Leicester. Seamus is going to again talk to us a little bit around his journey. On the 22nd of Feb, we've got Niall McGinn, Northern Ireland international, current Aberdeen player. We'll talk a little bit around his career. Massive thank you to Paddy for joining us this evening. Some really good insights into his thinking and what way he does things and what way you guys do things, Paddy, as well, as a group and as a team. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, no problem at all. And just on the Seamus webinar, I'll be tuning in. Seamus, good friend of mine, a very, very good coach. So I would absolutely recommend joining in on that one.
Appreciate that, Pad. I enjoyed it.
Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you, guys. And don't forget, please, to share your thoughts on social media. Tag us. Paddy, what's your Twitter tag?
At PBY88. And just one point on the back of that, I remember when I first started my coaching journey, jumping on the people close to me, people back home that give me opportunities and experiences. And I always try and make a point of, if anyone contacts me, I always try and get back to them. It might take a day, a week, or a month, but I always make a point of trying to get back to you. So don't be shy in reaching out. And if I can help you or give you any form of advice in any way, by all means, just drop me a message, because I've been at the start of my journey, and I was grateful for the opportunities people give me.
Great job. Thank you, Paddy. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And Leeds got 3 points today, so you couldn't annoy me. So take care.
All the best.
Thanks, guys.
Thomas again. Good man.
Thank you. Thanks, Keith.